Hey everyone, welcome back to another deep dive.
Excited to be here.
Me too. Today we're doing something a little different. We're heading over to Finland,
Oh, yeah.
but not for a vacation or anything. We're
Oh.
diving into their podcast scene. Specifically, we've got a bunch of Finnish sources about how businesses are using podcasts,
Cool.
which I'm super interested in because honestly, it
Yeah.
feels like everyone has a podcast these days.
It does. It really does.
So let's see what Finland's doing. We've got, articles, guides, even some workshop notes from Finnish podcasting experts.
Wow. A lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, and the mission here is to really see how even small businesses,
Right.
little guys, are using podcasts
Mhm.
to connect with their customers and really build community.
It's fascinating. I think what's really interesting is the way podcasts are changing the marketing game.
How so?
Well, it's not just about reaching millions of people. It's about those genuine, deep relationships with listeners.
Makes sense. Okay, so that's the overall picture, but why Finland specifically?
Well, for one, their podcast scene is booming.
Really?
Oh, yeah. But what really struck me is this idea, imagine a Finnish bakery,
Oh,
like
yeah.
a small family-run bakery,
I love bakeries.
sharing their passion for rye bread or whatever through a podcast,
Okay, yeah.
building a whole community around it. That's the kind of thing that's happening over there.
So it's not just big companies.
That's all.
More like a local personal feel?
Exactly.
Okay, I like where this is going. So what do our sources say about this whole Finnish podcast world?
Well, there's this guide, Micro Oppimiselto, it's called.
Okay.
And they basically lay out how podcast listening in Finland has become a way of life.
Interesting.
Like by 2021, a third of Finns were regularly listening to podcasts.
Wow, a third.
A third. And that's just back then, so
Yeah.
probably even more now.
So it's pretty popular.
Huge.
Yeah.
And there's also this webinar by Juhani Pajunen on Marketing Finland, where he talks about how Finnish businesses are using podcasts in all sorts of creative ways.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we've got a lot to dig into.
Yeah, we do. Now, I have to ask, since you're in Finland right now,
Right?
are you one of those podcast fans?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you listen to?
Well, I like a good mix.
Yeah.
I'm always learning something new.
Yeah.
But sometimes just a good story or...
That's cool. You know what really surprised me? It's not just casual listening in Finland. People are spending like 20 to 25 minutes per episode.
On average, yeah. That's pretty standard.
Wow. And the stats say that many listeners get through almost half of each episode.
At least.
That's serious dedication.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
It shows they're engaged with the content.
Right. It's not just background noise.
It's not.
It's quality listening time, which for businesses,
Oh, yeah.
that's gold.
That's what you want.
So when are Finns finding the time to listen to all these podcasts?
Well, think about it. You're commuting, maybe on the train or the bus, walking the dog, maybe doing some chores around the house.
Right.
These are moments when you can really focus on what you're hearing.
Yeah, it's like your hands might be busy,
Exactly.
but your mind is free.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So are you ready to jump into some examples? Like actual Finnish businesses killing it with podcasts?
Let's do it.
Awesome.
Well, first, you should know the term Arity podcast.
What's that?
It's Finnish for business podcast.
Oh, okay, so that's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about. And we've got some killer examples.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. First up, Nordnet.
And who are they?
They're a financial services company. And they launched this podcast called Rahapodi,
Rahapodi. Okay,
which is all about investing.
makes sense.
And they went all out. Top-notch production, marketing, the whole 9 yards.
So
Really smart. And it paid off big time.
it did.
Big time. Rahapodi became one of Finland's most popular podcasts.
So it's not just about throwing something out there.
No.
You got to have a strategy.
Absolutely.
Okay, what else?
Another great example is Danske Bank,
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
big name in finance. Their podcast is called Taloudellinen Mielenrauha.
Taloudellinen and Mielenrauha. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that.
It's a mouthful, right? It means financial peace of mind.
Oh, I see. So it's all about building trust.
Yeah. Establishing themselves as the experts.
Makes sense.
Right. So you see how these big companies are using podcasts strategically?
Absolutely. But one thing that's really cool is that it's not just these huge corporations in Finland who are using podcasts.
That's what's so exciting.
Right. Like our sources point out that there's this whole world of smaller communities podcasted is out there.
A whole universe.
Proving that you don't have to be a giant to make an impact.
You don't. It's about finding your niche and connecting with your audience.
I love that. Okay, so give me some examples of these smaller businesses or organizations rocking the podcast world.
All right, how about this? Farmascape.
What's Farmascape?
They're a company that promotes, rural living, getting away from the city and all that. Their podcast is called Malaisalame, which means country life.
That's cute. And it fits perfectly with what they do.
Exactly. They're not just selling a product, they're selling a lifestyle.
That's smart. Okay, I need more examples. What other industries are doing this in Finland?
Oh, there's a bunch. Janosta Tekoihin, for example.
What does that mean?
From Thirst to Action.
Okay.
And it's by Tornion Panimo, a craft brewery.
Oh, cool.
It's all about, what goes into making their beer.
Nice. So you get a glimpse behind the scenes.
Exactly. Builds that personality.
That makes you thirsty, too.
Oh, yeah. And there's Levi Kappa X, a chain of record stores. Their podcast is called Lempa Lavini.
Which is?
My favorite album. They have guests talk about, albums that mean something to them.
I love that.
Such a good fit for a record store.
Right. Like, it's so natural.
Totally.
Okay, these are great examples. Anything else?
Oh, plenty more. Leonicast is one. It's all about marketing and sales. Yeah, experts talking about what's hot in the industry.
Okay.
Then you've got Patronets, a payment processing company.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and their podcast is Maksakupla, or Payment Bubble. All about, the world of payments.
I see. So, it's not the most exciting topic?
Maybe not on the surface.
But they found a way to make it interesting.
They did. And that's the point, right? Any industry can find a way to make podcasts work.
Yeah. But I bet some people listening are thinking, okay, that's cool, but what about me? Can my small business really benefit from this?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is a big fat yes. But it's not just about the benefits we've already talked about.
Like reaching your audience and stuff.
Yeah. It's also about this cultural thing in Finland. There's this strong emphasis on authenticity and trust.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So when a Finnish business starts a podcast, it's sending a signal. Like, hey, we want to have a real conversation with you.
Makes you feel like you know them.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. So it's not just about pushing a product. It's not.
It's about building a genuine connection.
Right.
Which is what we all want, really.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. I think it's really about creating that feeling of connection.
Right, like you're letting people in.
Exactly. And that's super valuable in Finland. Consumers there, they really value authenticity.
Yeah, I can see that.
So when a business starts a podcast, it's almost like they're saying, hey, we trust you enough to share our thoughts and ideas with you.
It's a different level of engagement.
Totally. Okay, so let's say I'm a small business owner in Finland.
Okay.
And I'm sold on this whole podcasting thing. Where do I even start?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Right. Well, you've got options. One way is to create your own Biority podcast.
So my own show.
Your own show, where you're the host, sharing your expertise.
That sounds kind of cool.
Right? You become the thought leader, the voice of your brand.
But also a lot of work.
I won't lie, it's a commitment.
What if I don't have the time or the resources,
I get it. But there are ways to make it happen.
Well, first off, you can outsource.
Outsource.
Yeah, there are companies in Finland that specialize in podcast production.
Oh, interesting.
They handle all the technical stuff, recording, editing, all that.
So I can just focus on the content.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The fun stuff.
That makes it a lot less daunting.
Right. And another thing to remember, building an audience takes time.
Patience.
Lots of patience.
Like a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. You got to be consistent, nurture that audience.
Makes sense. Okay, so I'm starting to get this, but let's say I'm all in on creating my own Xerities podcast. What kind of format should I go for?
Ooh, good question. There's so many options.
Too many?
Maybe. But that's the beauty of it. You can tailor the format to fit your personality, your brand.
Okay, break it down for me. What are some popular formats?
Well, one of the most popular is the interview format.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
Classic for a reason. It's a great way to bring in different voices, experts,
Keep things interesting.
Exactly. You could interview industry leaders, local artisans, even your own customers.
Oh, I like that. Hearing from actual customers.
It's powerful stuff.
Okay, what else?
If you're a good storyteller, you could try a narrative approach, more like, an audio documentary.
Oh, wow. So like telling stories about my company.
Exactly. Or your industry, even your customers. You're painting a picture with sound.
I can see that.
It's engaging, immersive.
What if I'm more of a solo act?
Then a solo show, or what they call a monocast, might be your thing.
Monocast. Okay.
Yeah. This is where you share your own insights, deep dives into certain topics.
So like really establishing myself as an expert.
Exactly. It's a more personal connection with the audience.
I can dig that.
Right. And then there are discussion podcasts.
Multiple people.
Yeah, like a roundtable discussion. You can bring in colleagues, industry experts.
Get different perspectives.
Exactly. Debates, friendly disagreements, keep it lively.
Okay, I'm getting all sorts of ideas now.
See? It's
Yeah.
exciting.
But I know that creating a good podcast takes more than just picking a format and hitting record.
Oh, for sure. There's a lot of planning involved.
Like, what are some practical tips for actually planning and structuring my episodes?
Great question. And you know what? We actually have some insider info from a recent podcast workshop in Finland.
No way. Tell me more.
Yeah, it was hosted by DigiBoost and XBit Business Clubs in Lapland,
Okay.
and they brought in this expert, Ulla Tiranen from Seenerts.
To lead the workshop.
Yeah, she shared some amazing tips for small businesses specifically.
Okay, let's hear them.
All right, so first up, she emphasized defining your purpose and target audience.
Like, what do I want to achieve with this podcast?
Exactly, and who are you trying to reach? Those are the first questions you got to answer.
Makes sense. You need a clear vision.
You do. Then she talked about crafting your podcast's voice and concept.
It's a voice. Okay.
Yeah, like what's the tone? Is it conversational, educational, serious?
So it's about giving your podcast a personality.
Yeah, and choosing a concept that aligns with your brand.
Right, so everything feels cohesive.
Exactly. She also gave some tips for structuring the episodes themselves.
Oh, that's helpful.
She recommended starting with a jingle.
Like a little theme song?
Exactly. Sets the mood, gives you an identity.
Okay, then what?
Then comes the intro.
Where you introduce the topic.
Yeah, give a little preview of what's to come.
Hook the listeners.
Exactly. Then, of course, the main content.
The meat of the episode.
The meat. This is where your chosen format comes in, whether it's interviews, storytelling, whatever.
And then you wrap it up.
Right. Tiranen suggested having a wrap-up section where you summarize the key points.
So it all sinks in.
Exactly. And finally, the outro.
Say goodbye.
Yeah, maybe play another jingle. And most importantly, include a call to action.
Oh, right, like telling people to subscribe or follow you.
Exactly. Keep that connection going.
Okay, so I've got the structure down. But what about the content itself? How do I make sure my episodes are actually interesting,
The million-dollar question. Well, think about the podcasts you enjoy listening to.
Okay.
What keeps you hooked? I think, for me, it's that feeling of authenticity,
Yeah, like the host is being real.
Exactly. And a good story, of course.
A good story always helps.
Always. It's got to have that natural flow, like a good conversation.
Right, like I'm hanging out with friends, learning something new along the way.
That's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
And, of course, it has to deliver value.
Right, like I should feel like I gained something from listening.
Absolutely. Whether it's knowledge, inspiration, even just a good laugh.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, totally. So it's not enough to just have a podcast. It's got to be good.
It's got to be good. Okay, so let's talk audience growth. You've poured your heart into creating this amazing podcast.
Right?
How do you get people to actually listen to it?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. Luckily, our Finnish sources have some great tips.
All right, lay them on me.
First things first,
Mm-hmm.
know your audience.
Makes sense.
Who are you trying to reach? What are they interested in?
So it's like any other marketing, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got to know your target market.
Okay, so once I know who I'm talking to, how do I actually get my podcast in front of them?
Well, when you're first starting out, tap into your existing network.
Friends and family.
Yeah, colleagues, social media followers, everyone.
Tell everyone to listen.
Exactly. Spread the word.
Okay, what else?
Don't be afraid to reach out to other podcasters,
Oh, interesting.
especially in your niche, Propose collaborations, guest appearances, cross-promotion, things like that.
So it's about building relationships.
Totally. Supporting each other.
I like that.
Right. Okay, now what about those people who aren't already in your circle? How do you reach the wider podcast universe?
Yeah, that's the challenge.
It is. Discoverability is key.
Okay, so make it easy for people to find.
Exactly. Make sure you're on all the major platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all of them.
Right, so it's not enough to just create it. It has to be out there.
It has to be findable.
Got it. What else can I do?
Pay attention to your metadata.
Metadata. What's that?
It's basically all the information about your podcast.
Like the title and description.
Exactly. And the category, keywords, all that stuff.
So it's like telling the platforms what your podcast is about.
Exactly. Make it clear, concise, and use relevant keywords.
Like SEO for podcasts.
Exactly. Okay, now let's talk about actively promoting your podcast.
All right, how do I do that?
Social media is your best friend.
Of course.
Share teasers, behind-the-scenes stuff, interesting quotes from your episodes.
Get people excited.
Exactly. And don't forget to interact with your followers, respond to comments, answer questions,
Build that community.
Yeah. What about paid advertising?
Does that work for podcasts?
It can, but our sources say it's trickier than other types of content.
So maybe focus on organic reach first.
Yeah. Build those relationships, collaborate, use social media effectively.
Makes sense. Now, we talked earlier about guest appearances.
Oh, yeah, those are great.
How do those fit into the whole audience growth strategy?
Well, it's a fantastic way to tap into a new audience.
Okay, so I go on someone else's podcast.
Right. Share your expertise, promote your own show.
Like borrowing their audience for a bit?
Exactly. Just make sure it's a good fit,
Yeah.
The audience should be interested in what you have to say.
Right. Target the right people. What about email marketing?
If you have an email list, definitely use it.
Okay.
Promote your podcast, share links to new episodes, maybe even give your subscribers some exclusive content.
Nice. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to creating great content, right?
100%. No amount of marketing can save a bad podcast.
So what makes a podcast truly great?
That's a question for the ages, right?
Yeah.
But I think it comes down to a few things. Authenticity, connection, value.
Yeah, those are important.
And a good story, of course. Don't underestimate the power of a good story.
Absolutely. So it's about being real, connecting with your audience, and giving them something they'll actually enjoy.
Exactly. And one last piece of advice from our Finnish friends. Be patient.
Right. It takes time.
Building an audience is a marathon, not a sprint. Don't get discouraged if you don't see results overnight.
Okay, good to remember. Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about the Finnish podcast scene.
Me too. It's such a vibrant, innovative space.
And it's clear that Finnish businesses are really embracing this whole podcasting thing.
They are. They're finding creative ways to connect with their audience, build trust, and share their stories.
It's inspiring, really.
It is. And, I think there's a lot we can learn from them.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening out there, if you've been thinking about starting a podcast, I say go for it.
You might just surprise yourself.
You never know what you'll create and who you'll connect with.
That's the beauty of it. All right, that's a wrap for our Finnish podcast adventure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those podcasts rolling.